All right, so keep this in mind. Church, coming to church and being around the things of God is for sanctification and preparation. So it helps us to set ourselves apart and it prepares us to be obedient. But it's not for accommodation and, this might not be a word, pacification. It's not designed to pacify you, to accommodate you. It's to sanctify you and prepare you to be obedient. Not to, what did I say? Accommodate you and pacify you for convenience. It's not a convenience store. It's actually a purpose store. But your payment for purpose is obedience. Or payment for fulfillment, rather. Before you ask what's pleasing you, make sure you're pleasing him. Before you ask what's pleasing you, are you pleasing him? Before you even think about, am I being pleased? Ask yourself, are you pleasing God? I heard an ant run across the carpet. Is that quiet in here? All right, okay. All right, so our goal is obedience only. God is not who you engage at your convenience. God is not an accessory. It's something we teach in premarital and marriage counseling is don't treat your mate like an accessory. Treat them like they're essential. But the scripture says love your wife as Christ loves the church. So we don't treat God like an accessory. God is essential. So if you have God, are you fulfilled? If that's all you got, if you don't have a job, you don't have a car, you don't have a house, if you had God, are you fulfilled? Are you like, well, I got you, God? Me and my wife talk about this a lot because this is a whole nother transition for us to grow with new people. So it takes a lot of patience. Everybody's going through their different growth process. Some people are consistent. Some people are not because they're evil or mean. They're just, everybody's growing. So it's a lot of patience. And then you deal with attack. We've dealt with attack the last couple of years, persecution and stuff like that. You all dealt with persecution. But we've been fine because we got each other. Like, that's my best friend. So we talk about it all the time. I was like, babe, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're my best friend. And God, we just talked about it this week. So glad that you're my best friend and you love me and I love you. Because this would have been difficult by myself. And she said it would have been difficult by herself. This would have been horrendous. Because it's a lot easier to be patient if you got your best friend than it is if you're alone. You know what I'm saying? It's tougher, right? So same thing, if you got God, it's a lot easier. If you're in solid communion with God. I'm not talking about just drive-bys. I'm talking about you really are in communion with God. Things evolve and they're a lot easier for you. So if you lose sight of the opportunity to be obedient, you'll lose sight of purpose. God desires a willing obedience. So the scripture says if you're willing and obedient, you'll eat the good of the land, right? So it's a willing obedience, not a forced obedience. A forced obedience is what is called slavery. That's why he's given us choice instead of manipulation, control, and force. Because God is not he doesn't want to bound you. So he's giving you choice because he doesn't want to force you. And a lot of us have been in situations where we've been forced to do things. That's called slavery, right? Obedience is the traits of belief and willingness. It's the traits of willingness and obedience to obey. It takes us to another level in the midst of compromise. It takes us to another level because compromise is always calling. Man, you don't need to do that. But if you can be obedient, it takes you to another level because you've resisted you've moved beyond that resistance. Obedience is your fingerprint for purpose. Nobody can have yours for you. It's your fingerprint for purpose. Nobody else has your fingerprint. Guess what? No one can have your obedience either. You have your own obedience. So you can't go, how sometimes you can give somebody your membership card to get into the Y? Like, yeah, you take my card, you good. Or Ty went to get some supplies for us yesterday, so I gave her a card to go. I can't give her my obedience. I can't give nobody my obedience. It's only mine. right? Obedience always overrides faithfulness and authority. Faithfulness to authority. So sometimes, and I learned this as I was growing, a guy came to me. He was told this and he told it to me. He said, a guy came up to him and said, you know what? Your faithfulness has overtaken your obedience. And so when he said it to me, I was like, what? And what he was saying is like, the guy had, remember I talked about habit. He habitually was faithful. It was just a part, his autopilot, compliant. But then God was talking to him in the midst of that, but he figured, well, as long as I'm obedient, I'm compliant, and I'm committed and serve, I'm good. But obedience overrides that. The best example I'll give you, we're just going to talk about next week, but would be Abraham. Abraham was compliant. Abraham was faithful. God shows up and said, leave your family, leave where you are, because he was taking them to a place. Remember, we're talking about a place for your grace, a place where I want you to go. He says, now I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make you a blessing. I'm going to bless them that bless you. If you study it out in the Kamash, God said, go for yourself. He said, okay, you've been so compliant to your family. You follow, he had all the Jewish laws down. But after a while, it was out of habit. So his faithfulness was just out of habit. But God was like, I said, the word says, be faithful to another man's, God will give you your own. God was trying to get him his own. But he was like, no, I'm just good with the faithfulness because, this kind of scary getting out of this comfort zone. See, but God spoke to him to be obedient in the midst of faithfulness. He wasn't doing nothing wrong. But it would have become wrong if he wasn't obedient. The same thing he was doing that was approved now would have been in disapproval mode if he wasn't obedient. Right? So obedience always arises your faithfulness and authority. And obedience is the key to maximizing all your moments. The scripture says redeem the time. I probably should just end there. Scripture says redeem the time. So you maximize your moments, buy up the time. And so every moment you want to maximize your moments. When I crossed over to 40, I remember the Lord was like, okay, I need you to make accurate decisions. You can't be playing around now. Like when you're 20 something, you really can't play it in, but you think you can. Like you figure you got bounce back time. So you go, if this doesn't work out, you figure you got time. Then, it seems like you go from 20 to 40 in a blink of an eye. Like, I was just 20, especially like my son's 35. So when last year, he was like, Dad, I said, I already know. I said, you saying to yourself, man, I'm going to be 40 soon. I said, I already know what you're thinking. I said, but you was going to be 40 soon before you realized it when you turned 34. I said, so now you're starting to feel that pull to, I can't play around and waste time. Never could. But you think you can. You have to make accurate decisions. So you can't make emotional decisions. It can't be based on how you feel. It can't be based on the circumstances. They have to be obedient decisions. That makes sure you maximize your moments, and it makes sure you buy up the time appropriately. So a lot of times you think you got time, or you're too scared to be obedient. But you ain't got, only time you have is the moment of obedience. How about that? That makes sure you maximize that moment. That's enough for today. Stand on your feet.